Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Welcome back to the relay. I'm Matt, your host. Will, my co host, is not here today. He handled the Alki interview with Mr. Nils last week, where we dropped a bunch of alpha about Alki and the future of robotics. But I am joined today by Mr. Russ from WayFi. He's an OG in this space. He's been around the DY space for how many years now?
Oh man, about 2022 is where I really got active. Yeah.
And in crypto for a good chunk of that time as well. So we're going to be talking about decentralized wireless. We're going to talk about some tokenomics, some coordination, all sorts of DY stuff today. So you're going to want to lock in for this. This man is an industry veteran, not just in telecoms, but in our specific distributed infrastructure DY space as well. So how you doing today, Russ? Thanks for joining
Awesome.
us.
Yeah, happy to be here. Yeah, I guess I kind of feel like one of the veterans in the space, being around here so long. I did mine, Bitcoin back in college, so I guess you could call me one of the OGs. Although there are several people I would refer to who went in much bigger and much more confidently in the meeting than I did. I mostly stayed on the sidelines until I saw, hey, telecom. What's all the stuff about communications and infrastructure? That's what got me really excited.
It always seems to get you whenever it hits your industry.
Yeah.
When it started, excuse me, when I heard about DPIN just a couple of years ago, it really kind of struck a chord with me because I was in trucking and logistics, so it hit it hit that note of the physical devices, and that's really when it came alive.
Yeah. I've been sitting on the sidelines watching a lot of wireless ISPs, and I thought, well, that it's kind of interesting, but I thought that was kind of a rough business to get into. But then I started saying, hey, there's these new communication networks going up, and then I did see the first kind of helium miners go up, and that's when I was like, hey, this looks interesting. I'll keep an eye on it. And all of a sudden, it was exploding with interest and people saying, wow, I can't believe how much money I'm making, and there were a lot of shipping backlogs back in the day. Found out a lot of stories afterwards, what caused those, what was going on with kind of the tokenomics. It kind of caused a perfect scenario of it really caused the token to do really well, and a lot of people were well positioned to make a lot of money in a very short amount of time. So that's when I really got, hey, this is kind of serious. So that's when I first started with some IoT miners. Got an IoT fleet going in a couple states. And then thought this was kind of cool. Wasn't really, I'm not really much of an IoT kind of guy. I usually do. My background was mostly in cellular. I went to school for computer engineering. I also went and got a business degree. I also got a cybersecurity master's. I got a bunch of industry certs. So and worked for a lot of large telecommunications companies. So I was a principal engineer at Verizon Wireless. I worked there for many years. I helped them build a very large portion of their network in the Midwest central states. And then I was put on a team that actually set up and deployed their cloud infrastructure all over the world. So they flew me to dozens of countries where me and my team would install and build up all the infrastructure. So it's kind of cloud services in the very beginning going into it. But I always say the telecom bug, they always say once you work in telecom, it never really leaves you, even if you leave. And that was definitely true. I even came back and worked for US Cellular as a senior engineer and helped them with mostly on protecting their infrastructure from threats. So dealt with a lot of nation state attackers, a lot of people attacking cell sites, attacking infrastructure, and keeping it up and resilient. My background on how the network works, and of course, cybersecurity, good fit. And then that's when I really started going in pretty heavy with the DUI at the time. Was kind of the new tin. We did, we're decentralized wireless. That's kind of died off now. And DeepIn is dead, I think, phase the industry right now, just due to so many companies not being able to fulfill their promises. With especially a lot of companies dumping off hardware that's obscenely overpriced. So yeah, I mean, it can go into it in a little more detail of kind of what got me here. I worked at startups, and ended up where I'm at today, working with a great team of people we get to stay in the telecom industry and contribute back the industry as well. And have even won, some pretty impressive industry awards. So there's a lot to go into.
I was going to say there's so much to unpack there. I mean, you've been around for several years. So you mentioned the early days of Helium, the CBRS days. There's a lot of history there. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of lessons to be learned too, frankly, from those experiences. So definitely want to pick your brain on that and kind of maybe distill some of those lessons here. Just kind of lay out your opinions. Strong opinions, loosely held. That's kind of the way I like to roll.
I think that's a good approach.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody convinces you otherwise, or your experience shows you otherwise, then change your mind on stuff. But yeah, I kind of want to get into your background a little bit. So you're obviously very well qualified to kind of talk about telecoms because you've been in the space for 20 plus years. So what kind of brought you from the telecom field? You mentioned you have background engineering, then telecommunications, kind of move into like cryptocurrency. You said you mined Bitcoin in college. Was that kind of like the start of it? And when was that?
Yeah, that would have been 2008 during the market crash. Yeah, I was mining Bitcoin back then. I remember it was CPU mining in the beginning, then it went to GPU mining. So yeah, those were kind of the wild days when it was under $100, sometimes even less. So I've probably thrown away and lost more Bitcoin, unfortunately, than anything else on old laptops. Definitely emphasized with the guy, trying to find his old hard drives. I was like, yeah, if I had those, who knew? But yeah, I was into it. I was telling people about it when I worked at Verizon Wireless, and I thought it was crazy. And then when Bitcoin took off, people were like, hey, about that Bitcoin thing. I was sitting there like, hey, you were one of the early people who identified that. My main, kind of frustration coming out of the telecom industry is it was very, in my opinion, very monopolized and very slow and hesitant to innovation and competition. So I thought there was a lot of opportunity there because the technology isn't really the issue in my experience. There's some things there with the cost of the hardware and difficulty standing up and maintaining physical infrastructure. I think that's what the big cellular providers across the world are really good at, is installing and maintaining cellular infrastructure. But I was like, why can't I set up my own node in my own neighborhood? Why can't I set up my own tower and serve my own customers? And I found a lot of people who were doing that in the kind of wireless ISP industry. However, the incumbents, made that very difficult. And today it's a very, very hard business to be in. Mostly due to all the kind of subsidies that have went out to people who deployed fiber. So it's made them very hard to compete with. And the reliability of fiber is also very hard to compete with versus wireless. It's much more reliable in general. It still gets cut, still has issues, but it's more reliable than an air interface. And from working at the carriers, like, it's funny that the biggest frustration was always what they call the air interface, which is just that last mile from the antenna to the phone. Especially in dense urban markets. So we're talking like Chicago, to where, you could literally put indoor radios in every building on every street corner, and you just kind of catch up in the densest areas. And you see this a lot for special events where they put in what they call, like a cell and light truck. They call them a colt, or a cow, a cell on wheels. It's kind of interesting terms, or a goat, a generator on a truck is another industry term. So that's how they get kind of remote service up or special event coverage up. And I was like, why couldn't I do that? It's not that hard to get a 10 gig. It's not that hard to order service. And these radios now, thanks to a lot of competition in the industry, are fairly affordable from certain manufacturers, especially wireless ISP manufacturers like Airspan. So you can get very high quality equipment, get reliable equipment, put it up. I was like, that to me sounds like a business. You can pencil this out to where you can actually make some money with this, and forecast that out 5-10 years. And we've seen a couple of very large ISPs do that, mostly regional ISPs who get out and cover several states here in the US. They're not as well known as kind of the big, like Spectrum and Charter, of course, the biggest of them all. But there's the other ones who cover maybe over a dozen states who've done very well with that model, and also aggressively took advantage of subsidy. So I was like, why can't I, as an independent kind of operator, stand up my own infrastructure, manage my own neighborhood? Well, there's a lot of complexity that comes around that. There's a lot of concerns as well about operating that. But I was like, hey, maybe this could work. I think if the price was good enough and there was enough kind of trust in the system to where it would protect the consumer and protect you as a provider, that could work. So I was like, hey, let's give it a spin. Let's try something new. We can rapidly bring down the costs of managing this infrastructure to where we can bring down the cost of providing service. I think this could make a lot of sense at scale. Like, I don't think anybody argues with the scale argument coming up. There can be some arguments about quality, but I think scaling makes sense in the trust issue. And then, of course, when crypto started to take off, I think it made a lot of sense there to say, hey, let's apply it to telecommunications and real world infrastructure. And that made sense. There were a lot of startups that went to the space. There are now a lot of startups who have exited the space, who had various different approaches. There were many of them in kind of what we call the IoT era, which is, for the most part, kind of past us. There were many of them in the CBRS era, because CBRS, is one of the very few exceptions to U.S. policy where we're ahead of most of the world, and able to free up spectrum to where, as long as you follow a set of rules by the FCC, you're allowed to put up radios and provide service to people. There are some complications around SIM cards and dual SIMing with phones that make that a little tough. But overall, technology works and it's very affordable. So that era kind of came and went. Unfortunately, that turned out to be more of an experiment, and with the carriers, they weren't really serious about that. You still got to work with the big guys, the big, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobiles of the world. Still today, they kind of view CBRS as more of an experiment. And also, a lot of people complain that there isn't enough spectrum dedicated to that, and the spectrum is also at fairly low power. There's a variety of proposals that fix those issues, but none of them are really getting any traction out there. So that era, kind of passed us by. And then we got to the current era with Wi-Fi roaming. Dramatically lower costs, as low as it gets. We're talking, some usually sub $200, sub $250 Wi-Fi equipment. If you go into the most efficient frontier, which was where I like to live, usually you're in about the 120 to 150 per AP kind of area. And then, you have management included. Cloud management, I think, is essential for managing a large fleet. You need to be an extremely efficient operator to be able to manage all your equipment remotely. You need the minimum equipment you need, literally just the access point. Maybe you're using like a smart switch, what they used to call maybe controllers back in the day, to kind of manage everything, manage the VLANs, configuration, the security, deep packet inspection, et cetera, depending how big of a setup you could have. But the most common setup I see a lot of people doing is they bring in their own dedicated internet. They bring in a trusted manufacturer they like to work with. I really like working with Alta Labs. The CEO and leadership team there are impeccable, and they're right on that most efficient frontier of not only providing affordable equipment, but they're also the most standards compliant in the industry. And whenever I've told them about an issue, they fix it usually within a week. It takes years to do that with others.
I've heard several deployers in kind of the relay community talking about going with the enterprise equipment and kind of just flashing onto these distributed infrastructure like DY networks. I kind of want to back up if you don't mind. The one of the initial things you were talking about was that this kind of DY, like decentralized wireless, as you called it, this is already a thing. Like, even outside of our kind of crypto, experience here, it's already something that occurs. And AT&T is, if I'm not mistaken, they kind of structured their business model to some degree around working with everybody in these small MSPs. Is that accurate?
Not really with MSPs. They structured their wireless roaming to where it's neutral, and they'll work with everybody. So they'll work with large operators, even some tapes, large and famous malls. They'll work with MSPs, ISPs. They'll work with, basically, they want to work with serious businesses who have large fleets with a large amount of traffic. What they're trying to solve is a coverage problem. So it's been close to 30 years, and there's still today places that are not covered very well by all the cellular networks. So they view it as a very cost-effective way to solve their coverage issue and to reduce churn off of their network. So that's kind of that narrow, efficient valley that you really want to target and go in. And by large fleet, it isn't a couple locations. You need to have a very large professional operation for them to work with you, where you're pushing significant amount of traffic, and also you're significantly growing. Often, I like working with them because I have a telecom background. So a lot of the ways they approach things make a lot of sense to me. They do tend to work slow, which is frustrating. Slow meaning months and years is kind of, the old telecom joke is somebody says, "Oh, it'll be done in September," and you always and the natural question is, "What year?"
That sounds like logistics, frankly.
Yeah, that's an old question from working inside the carriers, much less working outside of them. So they're just very slow and methodical in how they do things.
That makes total sense. I mean, they're dealing with tens of or even hundreds of billions of dollars, as an industry. So I'm kind of there's it's the exact opposite of kind of the crypto or DPIN world, frankly, which we kind of operate on days, weeks, and maybe months. It seems
Yep.
as far as the average focus on these projects, because frankly there is some work that goes into it. I mean, everything that you just described is you have to be a large operator to work directly with AT&T. This is a legitimate on the ground uh, physical business. It's not something that you just kind of crop up overnight. And so I'm kind of curious at kind of shifting into sort of the crypto world. What got you interested in these kind of distributed wireless networks, and kind of what most appealed to you about them?
Yeah, I loved it as a payment settlement layer. It was very easy to use, very low fee. Also very easy to start up and get a revenue stream very quickly. So it solves a big problem is the cold start problem. So for a lot of these wireless ISPs, you have to literally go out there and knock on doors to get customers. Go to events. It's very expensive and high customer acquisition costs. What was really interesting about especially the crypto industry is it accelerates business cycles very, very quickly to days and weeks instead of months and years, which I really liked. So if you're willing to work hard and bring a lot of value to the network, the idea being there that you'll be rewarded very quickly. And if you are a good operator, you'll be rewarded and be able to grow very quickly. And I've seen, a lot of large professional operators able to do that in the space. I've also seen several operators make some critical mistakes, in my opinion, and are no longer with us. Most of it comes down to, I think, just bad contract terms where they got too desperate to close deals, and now have deals that they can't that they have to break, at a minimum renegotiate in order to stick with, basically their promise within the terms and conditions that they attested to. A lot of it comes to making long-term agreements with very large counterparties on static terms, and dealing with crypto companies that are constantly changing the terms of the deal, constantly changing their rules, constantly changing their payouts, to where every month, it's like a finger in the wind. What am I going to get paid in? And how much am I going to make? And you're like, oh, there's a HIP and this and that. What they're effectively doing is changing the terms of your business, your consent. So they may do token votes and saying, oh, the community voted for it, but every crypto company I've seen, they control the vote. So it's kind of a sham, and it doesn't really matter. They control everything that happens. So it's really a one-sided arrangement. So it makes it a very difficult business arrangement when you're dealing with a counterparty who thinks they can just change all the rules constantly. But your customers, hold you to a higher standard than that. They just want reliable, consistent service at an affordable price. And if you're paying out, that you pay out a steady, consistent amount month over month. That's kind of the big promise that you have to keep. And if you break that promise, you're no longer a trustworthy counterparty. So this has really hurt a lot of people's reputations, and definitely the crypto industry's reputation, for people coming in and breaking agreements constantly, especially working with large infrastructure.
The DAO kind of structure we were talking about, the larger players or the networks themselves certainly seem to have an outsized influence on those votes. I've noticed that in quite a few of these networks over the years, or DAOs over the years, either way. But I'm kind of curious on the I guess the individual operators or the smaller operators.
Yeah.
For instance, Helium, XNet, I guess Wayru, who's no longer with us, but all of these DY networks appealed very much to a smaller operator, like somebody like myself, kind of coming in, and you can get a return in maybe a few months or a year. And I'm kind of curious as to your thoughts on, do you think that the kind of the shorter term ROI focus is is that a healthy way of viewing this particular industry? I guess maybe my question is more specifically for telecom in particular, because that's kind of your wheelhouse.
Yeah. Well, I think it was strategies to get initial market share and to grow very quickly. You have to work with your initial customers. Have to be people who are extremely passionate about what you're working in and are almostly obsessed with what you're doing. And you definitely found that, especially in the helium space. A lot of people who made a lot of money initially became very obsessed with it, and kind of drove that community. And we've seen this across the space. You can even talk to like Cardano people or ETH people. You see similar tribes throughout the industry. And telecom is on multiple chains. We just, helium is the biggest and the first of, kind of made history in this, proving that this model, can work, at least on a short-term scale, coming in. So I think that it was a strategy to get market share and work with people. And then from that, kind of start working with the more serious partners now. Unfortunately, what we've seen, and it's kind of, and I predicted this, is that they are now they are catering kind of exclusively to kind of larger groups. They're giving them preferential pricing. They are now charging for support. There's all these fees. They're getting, a lot of differentiated treatment if you're a larger organization. They have, changing cutoffs and changing rules for what that is. So it makes it, very difficult for someone who just started today versus somebody who started 2 or 3 years ago, to really start working with them and say, hey, how come I'm getting worse pricing? How come I have to pay a giant fee if I want to get paid in cash, or cash equivalent? How come I have to pay for technical support, or I can't get more than one ticket? How come no one ever responds to me? How come I can't get any help in anything? It's just that there's a very large support burden working with smaller providers, and they don't want to pay that tax anymore, in my opinion. And they're going to continue to stratify and put in these cutoffs and fees, lots of fees, lots of conditions, lots of hoops to jump through. Unless you're someone who's very large, or very large counterparty, who can then, punish them and say, no, I'm not going to pay these fees. No, you're not going to treat me worse. I'm going to get fair pricing. You're seeing more and more of that throughout the industry across projects, that are out there. So, and there is competition here. We have seen several companies exit the space. Pollen exited the space quite famously from the CBRS world. They're still around and still operating, but they've basically completely exited the crypto space by their own admission, and kind of rugged everybody who believed in them. Wayru, recently went out. They were another one that, kind of came in, but I think they just, had hit a cash crunch, couldn't raise any more money, and eventually had to shut down operations very quickly.
I believe they were a philanthropic kind of decentralized wireless network trying to actually provide coverage to places in the world that just don't have any coverage, or have really terrible coverage.
Yeah, they had the most affordable equipment. I really like working with Charvel, their CEO, who's now moved on to another startup. Kind of tangential to the telecom space. I really like the affordability of the equipment, and the mission. Especially in South America, they put up a lot of equipment at universities and rural areas. I think the issue was just getting the economics to work before you run out of cash, and that's been the race that a lot of I think a lot of startups have come up with a lot of poor business models that were set on hyping up crypto tokens, which was great when there was a lot of hype in the token, especially post-COVID. That was an excellent business strategy that worked very well and made a lot of people millions or tens of millions. Unfortunately, now we're in a bear market, and liquidity is everything. Liquidity is extremely valuable. So people are now exclusively saying, I need cash or USDC. I refuse, serious counterparties, especially large companies, just can't take on crypto payouts or arrangements. They don't trust it. They've been burned. A lot of people, unfortunately, especially in the helium community, a lot of people felt burned who worked with helium people, because the price drops out, contracts were broken, promises were broken, a lot of leases were broken. So a lot of people in the industry have long memories, and they're like, hey, I got burned. I'm not doing that again. I need a solid contract that I can rely upon with a serious counterparty that reliably pays out. So that's been a challenge for a lot.
There's an element, kind of a thread that runs through all of these situations, that it seems as though a lot of these projects don't have somebody with, say, decades of experience in a particular field that they're trying to break into. And if you don't have that experience to rely on, you're much more likely to make rookie mistakes, because you just don't have that experience to rely on. And real quick, Will has joined us mid interview.
Yeah, about that, guys. I got back from a long week of nice vacation yesterday, so I slept in today and slept longer than I thought I would.
Well, we're glad you could make it, man. We're talking DY, decentralized wireless, and the history of Helium, XNet, Wayru, and all the rest.
Heck yeah. No, I kind of caught the tail end of the conversation there. It's really interesting how, like, to your point, Russ, that me included in this argument or in this conversation as like a deep in deployer, how cash flow is so important, and the desire for speculation, especially recently, is just so low. It's the sentiment in the space has just been like destroyed, and I think that the appetite for that speculation is just gone, almost gone. I mean, I know it's gone for me. I prefer stable coins. I prefer cash flow. I can predict it a little bit more, as opposed to hoping and praying. Hopes and prayers don't necessarily calculate well into a business model. Whereas I have fixed costs and I have payouts to my customers and my clients and my hosts, whatever you want to call them, that they need as well. And so they start asking questions when it's like, hey, why did my payouts drop from $200 a month to $5? And I say, oh well, tokens down. Sorry, just gotta wait. Hodl.
Yeah, I think that ties into, I mean, that kind of short-term focus in, mentioned Russ, that the telecom industry talks in terms of years and even like decades in some cases, whereas our industry is, the business cycles compressed to like days or weeks, as you said earlier. So I'm curious to know kind of your perspective on that. I mean, is that you said it was very exciting earlier, but I mean, is that sort of just the natural progression going from kind of the shorter business cycles to solve that cold start problem, and then kind of graduating towards a more professional kind of decentralized network of professional deployers? How do you kind of see that that evolution?
Yeah, I see a lot of them. Starting out, you can stay small, just friends, nights and weekends. But really, to scale up, if you're good at it and you like it, you build a cash flow positive business. You retain your customers. You give them, as fair rates, and you're as honest with them as possible. That allows you to grow, and how big you want to be is kind of up to you. Like I mentioned earlier, I had an IoT fleet, across several states, and that was mostly just friends and neighbors. That was pretty easy to do, and it's literally plug in, a unit, put it up high. You can do a professional outdoor installation if you want to, but you didn't have to. And I see a lot of these people now have grown over the last couple of years and have gotten larger fleets. Some took investment. You see that more like the long fly folks who kind of went with a very fast growth model, and hired salespeople to like pound the ground. So it's very expensive. But if you're growing quickly and you need capital, it works and kind of gives you the kind of the treasure chest that you need to pull from to grow very quickly, as long as there's a lot of opportunity. The other part of it is, growing it responsibly. So I've seen a lot of companies in the space and a lot of operators in the space go out of business by promising, consistent high payouts at obscene rates.
Oof.
That we saw that in IoT days. I saw it again with CBRS people who didn't learn their lesson, and the CBRS wave went through, and that destroyed a lot of people. A lot of people also timed it well, and did very well, and bought houses and cars and made a lot of money on it if you got the timing right. But there were plenty of people also got the timing wrong, and didn't do well. And now we see it kind of the Wi-Fi. We're kind of over that hump now to where, this the initial hype wave of incredibly high rates is over, and we're back to reality of what's sustainable. And that has crushed a lot of operators. I kind of talk to people, I'd say every week, that get crushed and say, hey, I promised people 50 cents a gig, and I can't, I have money, I subsidized it for a little bit, but now I'm running ragged. I'm like, I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to renegotiate that deal or break the contract, because that's an insane rate. No one can pay that. No carrier is going to pay that. Really, here in the U.S., unless they're maybe a small MVNO, you can get a rate like that. But the traffic is so little. You're talking about, for an average location, that's not a lot. I mean, I have a huge international fleet, and the MVNO traffic is, we're talking like drops in the bucket compared to how much you make from the big carriers. The big carriers are all that matters. That's going to be 99% of your revenue is going to come from the big carriers.
And those big carriers tend to pay like closer to, I think you were mentioning before, around like closer to 5 cents, 7 cents per gigabyte. Is that around accurate?
There's a range to it. It depends if we're talking about, the thing about it is that every carrier even though it's the exact same technology, views this differently. For like standard rates, you're in the single digits. Yep. For what you're getting for just, coverage you bring to them, and they're willing to pay for it. You can get higher into the double digits if you have premium locations that are in high demand. You do there. If it's, like we're talking about maybe an airport, for instance, or a stadium, those types of areas where there's a lot of people, together, and there's a big coverage gap there. Maybe a performing, arts center that's outdoors or somewhere that's remote. Sometimes special events as well. So there's some leverage there to get to the double digits, but it varies considerably by the carriers how they view it. Some of them view it as really a gross retention tool. Others are just very focused on where they want it, where they don't want it. It's a bit of a change there. And then MVNOs are mostly just trying to save on roaming costs for the most part, because they're usually paying the highest roaming rates. Here in the U.S. is where there's the most competition and the lowest rates. U.S. and Canada, included, I'll say most of North America. Once you get really outside of North America, and you start going, I'd say, into Europe, Middle East, that's where rates get quite attractive. A lot of islands out there in the Atlantic and Pacific pay very well. Right now, I have an insane demand coming in for Hawaii. So due to the conflict going on with Iran, a lot of CBRS has been turned off worldwide because just due to the way that it's structured, they're allowed to do that. So there's a tremendous demand for coverage, and CBRS absolutely fails when it gets turned off anywhere in a coastline. So there's a lot of demand coming in there saying, hey, I need help here, and on certain islands, certain territories to get additional coverage and equipment up, and willing to pay higher rates there. Higher rates usually mean double digits, but not always. It kind of depends on the carrier and how much they're willing to go for it. So it's back and forth, and we're still very, very early in this space, and we're still very, very small. People talk about like 100,000 APs like it's a huge fleet. There's roughly 2 billion access points out there. Like, we really need to get a point to where
2 billion.
Yeah, there's billions of access points out there. A lot of them are old, but we need to go after all these access points that are out there and really get to the point to where we have a fleet with 1 million access points. That's a real fleet. And that's when
this is actually very refreshing, because you're still clearly, inspired and building and focused on this, looking at kind of the decentralized wireless. Certainly the talk in our community has been a little bit more, I don't want to say negative, maybe a little bit more down, lower energy.
Just say what it is, Matt. It's been bad.
Look, we're in a bear market, and like you said, Russ, some of these networks are just not panning out. They're running out of cash flow. They're running out of runway. So it's nice
that
to
brings
see
me to a question I have, Matt, if you don't mind me asking it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to cut you off, but I guess so. Russ, would you say, like, I remember you saying in the last response you gave, how a lot of people have been having to like shut off their deployments. Like, obviously they're promising these high payouts, etc. But the carriers, the larger carriers being like the biggest customers that we have, they don't necessarily need that much coverage in a lot of those areas. They'd rather get coverage in high congestion areas or places out in the middle of nowhere where there might not be that much traffic. So would you say that this deployment game is kind of more leaning into these larger deployers and less into like the hobbyist deployers, where like the idea that everyone could deploy a hotspot and everyone can kind of share in these rewards is, I want to say a fallacy, but it's not as like hunky dory as people kind of made it out to be?
So yeah, I think if you're a smaller deployer, I'll kind of cast a wide net there. Maybe less than a terabyte a day is a very rough net. Then you're going to have to work with one of the major partners with the carriers, and that's something that I focused on. And you're going to really focus on, hey, is this a partner who I can trust? It's not going to like drop the floor on me on rates. It's going to pay out every month. It's going to pay out reliably. What matters a lot more with serious counterparties, meaning companies, business enterprises, I work with a lot of credit unions and banks, is reliability. They don't want the most money. What they want is someone they can call and who will pick up the phone and help them, who will provide consistent service, who will answer emails. They want good customer service, and they want consistent service. And that's really been a thing that crypto companies have completely failed at. Where is your customer service for Helium? Like, who can you call? They're like, oh, well, actually, if you buy this really expensive plan with us, you can call us. Maybe. You might not call someone in the US. You might be talking to somebody in South America because we outsourced it. So there's a lot of issues there with support. There's also a lot of issues with trust and constantly changing the rules of the game. A lot of these contracts, you can write in stuff like, subject to the rules of the carriers, which makes sense. Carriers don't change often, but they can. It's more of, dealing with hundreds of HIPs and community votes that don't take into account that a lot of people have set up businesses and payouts based on what the rules were. And, telling somebody, hey, there was a HIP change, I'm no longer getting POC payouts. So it went down, and it went down again because they changed the mechanism of how it works. And inevitably, here's how it works, I think logically, and most people were, I think, ignoring this for the past 2 years. The payouts need to be what the carriers are paying out minus enough to run the business profitably, and then to the end client. And I think Helium really misled a lot of people and said a lot of things that weren't true about how much they were getting paid and how much they were paying out. I think a lot of that was subsidized by their treasury. A lot of that has come out now. So, maybe I'll throw my Bitcoin address up for tips for those who are like, oh, you were right calling them out and demanding to see, the contract. Yeah, which of course you can't show your contract, but just saying crazy stuff that was not true at all. And now it finally came out. Oh, that wasn't real. This is real now. Trust us again. It's like, how many eras, how much can you have here when they drop the floor on you? And actually it's, 2-3 cents a gig is actually effectively what we're going to pay you. And, oh, wait, now we're going to put in a backstop because that's so low. We're losing everybody. We're going to try to keep it up a little bit. So I generally tell people, like, don't use lockdown equipment. Like, everyone, I think, regrets using Wayru equipment. Even though they did unlock it after they failed, but it's still not very usable. Helium equipment is worthless now. So, don't use lockdown equipment that you don't know and control. And also for enterprise deployments, like, you have to fully control the equipment. You have to control the firmware updates. One thing that came out that not a lot of people know about is the CBRS radios were backdoored that came up from buy cells. And buy cells was effectively banned here in the US because they were backdoored. So all those CBRS radios that were put up were all backdoored and going back to China. And that was proven. Multiple carriers reported this, who came out and said, hey, we can't run buy cells equipment because it's going back to these Chinese IPs. And we don't know what it's sending, but what the heck is it doing? So and those were the radios that most of DY put up back in the day. And both Paulin and them talking to, who knows what they were doing, but there was a back door in there. So there's a lot of concerns over that happening with Wi-Fi equipment, especially when they say, hey, install this device and trust me. Like, that doesn't fly in enterprise corporate environments or stadiums or airports. It needs to be fully vetted equipment you own, control the firmware of, and can audit and control in full. So I think that's what you need. Maybe for home hobbyist setups, it's fine. You're just playing around, isolated network in your home, not a big deal, but you don't make any money doing that these days. There's no way you're going to earn anything with that.
That's a great point. Yeah, I think the small, like, Helium devices, we were talking just about the subsidy. I mean, it's a subsidy to the tune of, if you're in the single digits, that's maybe what, 80-90% subsidy if they're giving you 50 cents a gigabyte, but they're only really getting 5. I mean, for somebody like myself, I have just a couple of Helium hotspots put up locally, local businesses, decent foot traffic, but nothing crazy, not like an airport, like, our friend Omar, Mr. Macon Bank has. And even he's seen a massive reduction in that just because of that subsidy. And, not to pick on Helium, they certainly proved out the model. It's fantastic. But I think if you set that expectation, then you're really setting yourself up for failure, because for somebody like me, I kind of operated off of those 50 cents a gigabyte or 30 cents a gigabyte economics and assumed, okay, well, here in about a year, I'll get a decent ROI off of this relatively cheap device. And it's no longer the case.
Yeah, and that's precisely why I asked you that question, Russ, was because of what Matt just said there. It makes me believe that because of the I don't want to say low, but, like, let's say 5 cents is the average. Just say that's like the staple, 5 cents per gigabyte is the staple. It makes 0 sense for me to do an installation as a, like, lower key, maybe hobbyist style deployer, to do a installation in, like, a bakery that gets, like, no foot traffic whatsoever, because now the cost of maybe providing my own backhaul and running the splits tears into all of my profits. And so I think down the road, like, you're going to have these more enterprise scale deployers. I mean, it's kind of proving out now that are the ones who can, get the deals, like you, for instance, can get those massive deals with those massive enterprises, those massive international companies, install in multiple locations, like hundreds or thousands of locations across the world, and get into those high traffic areas where, it's like 5 cents per gigabyte, but it's so many connections that, like, you can pay the splits, You can pay for the backhaul if you need to, and you can still make a decent profit out of that. I just don't think this is a small deployers game anymore. When it comes to DY specifically, I'm not talking about other DPINs at the moment.
Yeah, and I have one more thing to add to that. I kind of want to get your thoughts on this, Russ. If that's the case, then the large scale kind of professional enterprise deployers like Russ, you have 20 plus years in telecoms. You've been here. You know what's going on. Like the game, right? But your everyday person, Helium specifically was advertised as the people's network. But I think that other decentralized infrastructure networks advertise themselves kind of similarly in that they're accessible. You just throw this station up on your roof, or you put this hotspot into a local business and you can earn from it. Do you think we've kind of, if we move towards that kind of professional, larger scale deployers, are we kind of losing that decentralized, democratized access ethos?
I think the industry is moving in that direction. I'm not moving in that direction. I still support small deployers, and I actually think that a lot of large deployers, once they hit a certain size, I'm happy to help them even get direct deals with the carriers and help guide them and mentor them with this. So a big thing that I'm, kind of working on here is allowing, anyone to kind of come in. And, Helium's kind of a bad name in the telecom space. Crypto is a very bad thing in the telecom space. And so what a lot of these people run into is like, hey, I want to offer the service, but I don't want to have like any connection to, I want to have my own dashboards. Some larger deployers have set up their own dashboards. You can vibe code a dashboard pretty quickly with Claude, and tie in and get some stats up. But they also want to be neutral and say, I want to work with who I want to work with. You have to protect your back end, definitely, because you never know when you're going to get cut off or shut off by who you're working with. XNet famously got turned off by AT&T. We've had a lot of drama on the Helium network with outages going several days over weekends because nobody responds. Nobody apparently works on the weekend. So flexible and be able to move to different backends if you're not working with the carriers directly. I will say working with the carriers directly is extremely reliable overall. Like they don't go down even when their cellular network goes down, the backend still stay up and authorize authorized data traffic. That's hasn't been an issue for the past couple of years. So it's very harder for small deployers today because they don't have all the subsidies from all the startups who are willing to kind of spend investors' money to try and gain market share. Those days I think are over right now. They may come back, but you're no longer going to get insane rates. Like I was getting dollars per gig, several years ago for traffic, but I knew it wasn't going to last. So like this is absolutely insane. This is way above what the industry, what I know the carriers are paying out. If I'm getting like $4 a gig, and I know that the carriers are paying out, let's say 10 cents a gig, I was like, someone's making up that gap. And it's usually the investors who are going in, providing liquidity, supporting the treasury, et cetera. So, and a lot, has come up with, Helium. A lot of stuff was leaked on Twitter recently about the pay that they were paying themselves on the foundation, which was, in the millions. So we see that, the people's network, or like which people's network, who actually owns and controls this network. Like what you usually find is you need to have control of as much hardware as you can, your fleet as large as your fleet as you can, and have customers who will stick with you and be loyal to you, and kind of ride, things that inevitably happen in business. But you need to smooth that ride as much as possible. And we've seen, I think it's still possible for them, but they're in a much, much tougher environment than 2 years ago. They're not going to get 50 cents a gig. They're not going to get $1 a gig. 5 cents a gig is very, very hard to scale starting out. More than friends and family, you're going to have a very difficult time trying to bring people in. And it's been 2 years. Most people know about this industry now and have reached out, know who the players are, and kind of know who to work with. If they're large enough, they have their own carrier deals. If they aren't large enough, they already are kind of working with, multiple partners to make sure that they're protected, usually have their own gateway, have their own branding in the space to try and, kind of cut down the noise. With that said, I'll still say that we are very, very early. This is a long game. This isn't something you're going to win in 6 months or a year or 2 years. We're talking 5-10 years. So you need to have a profitable, scalable business with good support, good hardware partners, good network partners on the back end in order to survive that long. And I think a lot of companies that are trying to survive on raising money. So Wayru ran out of money. Google left the space, which is crazy. I don't think a lot of people really recognize that. why did Orion leave the space and stop working with AT&T? Because it wasn't profitable in their mind. They could no longer get the rates they were able to get in the past. So that's kind of a sign for the industry. Things are very competitive right now. Margins are thinner. And you really have to get down to who actually provides good support, who actually is going to treat partners equally and fairly when they're coming out, or are they going to, give them tokens that, who knows what they'll be worth next month. So far, the trend has been they're worth less. And I know a lot of, I feel for a lot of people starting out right now who are losing a lot of customers because they used to give them, let's say, 150 a month, and they give them 5. That person on the other end, that bakery owner, that small business owner, doesn't understand why. He just feels like he got ripped off because that's not normal. So, and no matter how you explain it to them, even if you tell them exactly what happened, if you did not set those expectations with them originally, like, hey, things go up and down quick, you can make a lot, but this can go very low very quickly. Sometimes you can go to 0. Welcome to crypto. So a lot of people don't understand that. So they're like, data went through, where's my pay? Is kind of how they look at it. So,
and it's very, very reasonable, frankly.
Yeah, I'd say that's for a traditional business owner. It's cash flows and business. You're like, I gave you traffic, you gave me out. So your contract said 50 cents a gig. Where's my 50 cents a gig? Well, it's not. Well, they shouldn't have signed that 50 cent a gig contract because it was. Well, I'd argue it was never that. That was being subsidized. But next thing is like you need to have some wiggle room there and kind of be open to say.
That's
hey,
exactly why I put in my contracts there is no expectation of payment.
Yeah.
Well, and just kind of talking about the tokenomics, I do want to kind of circle back to that and ask you about it, Russ. But it does kind of get a little bit difficult to kind of come on here and have these conversations and emphatically recommend that, hey, you can deploy this hardware and make money, especially when it comes to DY, because there is a lot more that goes into it. There's a lot more under the hood, and it's very clear that thinking in the short term is, unless you're really extremely nimble and you're willing to take on that massive risk, then you really are taking on a much larger risk, and you may never become profitable, frankly. But I'm curious on your thoughts on the token specifically, because we talked a little bit the other day about kind of token incentives, and you had a lot to say on that, and I kind of just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's great when there's a lot of hype around it. There's a lot of support, and then they're an upward trajectory. They're well supported. So we have seen projects still today that are paying out, in tokens that are still, stable. GeoNet is the classic example that everyone points to because they've done a very good job supporting the liquidity of the market, supporting the token. They actually set aside money from their revenue and support it very strongly. It's not optional. It's not if they feel like it. It's not if things are looking good. They always do it. So I think, give them a lot of, kudos and respect for actually sticking to their word, that they actually support their community. They don't say it, they do it with actual cash in the market. We're seeing, a lot of Hive Mapper announced stablecoin is going to be effective starting August. So they're forcing everyone over. There's also, I believe, Flight Grid has also announced stablecoin payouts. Helium, offers a payout stablecoin option. We have to pay a large fee. I think others are very similar, where you get penalized for doing that. But this has really, completely destroyed a lot of token valuations in the market to where they're effectively zero. We've also seen many deep-in projects, Sourceful and many others, who have said, you can keep the points, but we're never going to do a TGE at this point. It's TBD, which means at this point, never. So a lot of people feel, that was kind of a rip because they bought it with the expectation that they'd be able to, at a minimum, sell their tokens. But now they're just literally sitting on points. We're seeing that with quite a few deep-in projects. And that's kind of kicked off the deep-in is dead kind of meme and movement because you can't, who can you trust? Most of these companies have worthless tokens, and serious counterparties, serious businesses absolutely refuse to take tokens as payment. It's a complete non-starter, and in many cases, it kills the deal.
Yep.
That makes complete sense. And I mean, there's really only so much goodwill that you can burn through before there's none left.
Yeah, it's a goodwill bank. Yep.
That makes complete sense. Yeah, I mean, I think the things are certainly going to turn around. I mean, maybe not in DY, probably in DY, but just in distributed infrastructure and crypto in general. I mean, it's very clear we're in the throes of a bear market, which is kind of shaking a lot of people out, and a lot of these networks out. I mean, if the economics don't make sense, they don't make sense. That's what it was. In our previous conversation, Russ, you had a good, really good quote. A token does not make a bad business good, and I think that is just such a great phrase because it's so true. I mean, a lot of these companies or networks, they'll launch a token and the valuation is just it's in Saturn. It's not even close to Earth.
Yeah, I agree. It's been very popular, especially in this space, to offer insanely expensive equipment. Use that to fund a TGE. Everyone slams TGE and gets out. So we've seen this even in the we'll say in the wireless or access point space with Wi-Fi DABA. A lot of people felt let down with how poorly that went. I kind of stayed away from that because I was like, if I don't control the hardware, I don't really have anything.
Yeah.
That is your vote, and that is some power that you do have with a lot of these projects. Is like if you control the hardware, at least you have a vote. That's your real vote. It's not your token, it's not the DAO, it's your hardware. You can take that hardware to where you think it should go. And if they're not dealing with you fairly or giving you unfair rules or arbitrarily changing the rules on you, you just vote with your feet and go to somebody who will take that. And in my experience, it's been with working with carriers directly has really cleared a lot of the noise up in the market. For people going back and forth. So
yeah, and like working with those carriers directly too, like reduces your risk tremendously because you have that, like you already have like counterparty risk when working with carriers. Like there's already that risk like there. So now like you can think of it as like maybe doubling up or levering up on your risk by dealing with a third party to the counterparty. Which I mean that makes a lot of sense, Russ. I just wanted to point that out to the viewers.
Well, you can certainly see like me and Will's deployer journey through our the past 7 months of our interviews on the relay talking about distributed infrastructure and DY. But that's kind of a good segue because I'm curious, Russ, for WayFi. Can you tell us about WayFi and how some of these deployers could get involved? You mentioned you mentor people, you help the smaller deployers. So if there are some smaller deployers out there that are looking to kind of get on with the company, you tell them about WayFi?
Yeah. So, this comes up, I wouldn't say daily, but minimum weekly, talk to a couple of them. So I work with smaller deployers. We don't have a minimum, unlike others. We don't do discriminatory pricing like others. We don't charge for fees like others. We don't penalize people for taking cash like others. Like we just have a very, very simple model. And that's that we pay out monthly for traffic. That's it. We do take a service fee, depending on the locations you have. I give people real rates and real ranges, and that hasn't changed all year. And I don't expect that to change. Carriers ultimately do control the market, control the rates. They do sometimes pay people slightly differently, but lately, due to this market growing very quickly, rates have dramatically come down in a very quick fashion. I think that's why Google and Ryan left the market, is because there wasn't as much profit as they wanted there to be in the space. So, as our website, it's wayfirewireless.com. We do KYC with everyone. So you do have to jump on a call. We don't do remote or anonymous onboarding. We also require a W-9. We do pay our taxes. We do send everything to the IRS. This is not some dodgy tax thing where you can make this money and hide it. We are completely transparent. We pay our taxes. So we're also a U.S. company. We're 100% in the U.S. We're not like a lot of crypto companies that are overseas or outside the country, or you're signing a contract with, you don't know who you're signing the contract with. We're right here in the US. All of us have had clear background checks. No one has a criminal record or has ever had an issue like that outside of we're talking parking tickets, maybe some speeding tickets, as bad as it gets. So we have a clean, great set of staff who I've known for many years and we've worked with in the industry together. We've also never had a major issue with anybody. So we've never been involved in a lawsuit or never had any legal action against us. I think that really makes the field pretty small. We're a normal company. There's no crypto token or anything like that. We're very straightforward. We pay out in cash every month. Basically, you onboard. We have a portal where you see your statistics of the sessions. We are also the only company I'm aware of in the entire world, which is crazy, that actually shows you rejected sessions. Actually show when the carrier is rejecting it. and we stand behind that. So when a lot of sessions are getting rejected, that's carriers saying, for people who are paying, wanting to get paid out, that's carriers saying, I'm not going to pay you. So that helps give them at least an inclination something's going on, rather than just the amount they're getting paid being low. Like, what's going on? Oh, I'm getting a lot of rejections. Okay, at least you have some information. Versus when you go with the other people in the space, they hide that. They only show you what you're paid, and you have no inclination like how much traffic is being denied, or what's going on, unless you have a Goldilocks site. And I do several of those on my fleet that are Goldilocks sites where carriers can't get enough traffic. Those are extremely rare, and there's no good way to predict them. They can also change as well. They can get more picky over time, but with the payout model, that is an issue that a lot of traffic does tend to get dropped and blocked from people in there. One thing that we offer that's a bit different is we also have premium offerings. So, for instance, if you're working with a school district, or that there's a lot of subscribers from a carrier like AT&T there, we can give you premium service to where every phone that's capable of jumping on jumps on. That's a lot different there. There is a monthly subscription to that, but for customer safety issues, or you're dealing with anything with emergency services like FirstNet, there's a premium service that we offer that allows people to say, wow, all of our subscribers there in our school, now our Wi-Fi works everywhere. All of our devices work, all of our hotspots work. And often they're in a remote area, or they simply don't have the budget to install any type of repeater or DAS system. So that's something that we do as well. Also work with a lot of nonprofits, job training centers, domestic abuse shelters, and help get them set up so that they have the best service possible in there. Either give them a donation. In some cases, some nonprofits can't take that due to ethical requirements. So then we just work with them strictly as a nonprofit. So we try to be flexible, work with everyone here. We do enforce the rules uniformly. We do pay everybody the same rates. We don't discriminate against small deployers. We don't punish small deployers. We don't charge support for small deployers. And my goal is to kind of really help them up. One thing that we are going to be releasing in the near future is a portal for especially for small deployers, to where now they can have their own portal for their customers on their own domain, branded with their branding. So they now have basically their own independent business that is completely separate from us. They have, their customers have no idea they're working with WayFi unless they tell them. And they now have their own branding, their own business that they can set up completely independently with us. We support the back end, help the management support that. So that's something that we're very, very excited about. We don't force people to use a certain SSID. We don't force them to use our branding. We really want to work as a white label provider so that their customers have no idea who they're working with. We don't want, and we do also have partner protection. So if they go tell a business about us, or they get an IT person who's curious, we still do pay them at a minimum referral fee. That happens very rarely, but that has happened to our partner. Tells someone about us, and then they go backdoor them, go with us directly. So we do a partner protection, which is very rare. I'm not aware of anyone else in the industry doing partner protection, mostly because I don't think they respect their partners nearly as much as we do. And that's the only way we've been able to grow so quickly to where we are today. And another thing that we have that helps small partners, if you tell me what city you're in, I can give you a list of that the carriers would instantly approve and or basically would love to have. So if you're not sure where to go and where this is needed, I have a huge list of tens of thousands of locations all across the US, across all 50 states, of locations that need the service right now. I can give you a lead list. If you're willing to put the work in, kind of like Make and Bake does, hit the pavement and get customers, there's nothing stopping you. I can give you that list. I can't promise you're the only person who's ever seen that list, but I can promise nobody else has it, and give you at least a month to go there and hit it up and see if we can get some headway.
Perfect. Well, I mean, I was going to ask you specifically about that, about identifying locations for deployment. That I know we're coming up on the top of the hour,
Yeah.
so we'll respect everybody's time. I know Russ has a hard stop here, but thank you, Russ, for the wealth of information and the wealth of knowledge and expertise that you shared with us today, man. That's and frankly, thank you for shouting out WayFi and giving people an alternative to this kind of crypto token backed payout kind of scheme. Because if you're not looking for that to assume that that level of risk, WayFi may be an awesome option for you. I know that Make and Bank knows Russ quite well. So I know Omar can vouch for Russ. He's been around for a long time. He's been in the telecom industry for decades, so he knows the industry. So yeah, check out wayfirewireless.com. Also check out WayFi Wireless on X at WayFi Wireless. We'll shout it out in the description below. But for now, thank you all for joining us, and we'll catch you all next week.
Don't forget to mention we're gonna have a specific channel for WayFi Wireless as well in the Discord. So join the Discord if you want to talk to Russ directly. He's in our Discord channel. You can always hit him up, ask him questions. So yeah, Russ, we're gonna make sure we get you bothered as much as possible. People are gonna be flooding your DMs as much as possible. That's what we're gonna be trying to. That's our goal. That's what we're trying to do. But I'll throw it back to you, Matt, for the closer there. You're doing a beautiful
Absolutely.
job.
Yeah, we'll have to top the 16 meeting day. We'll make it 17 meetings.
Yes.
Well, wonderful. Well, thanks you, Russ, for joining us, man. We'd absolutely love to have you on again.
Yeah, appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. I'm happy to do a Q&A or Deep in After Dark if everyone wants to do a follow-up.
Fantastic.
Heck yeah.
We'll have you on for part 2 here soon. All right, y'all have a wonderful day, and we'll catch you soon. Catch you in the Discord. Why aren't you there? Have you said GM? If you haven't, you should. Take care, y'all.